The Nissan X-Trail E-Power with E-Force has 2 electric motors, a lithium-ion battery under the front seats, and a variable compression ratio turbocharged petrol engine. And yet, its fuel efficiency figures are 6.1 litres per 100 Ks. It's about 1.5 litres per 100 Ks better than the ICE engine, and it's about 1.3 litres per 100 Ks worse than its main rival, the RAV4 Hybrid with all-wheel drive. But those numbers are just that, numbers. As you'll find out in today's video as we take this thing for a spin out on the road, the E-Power is more than the numbers on paper. This car is seriously good, and you can see why it won our recent medium SUV comparison. So let's dive straight into this car, talk about the features of this TIL behind me and the interior, and talk about how it drives. Of course, I'd love to hear your comments on the X-Trail E-Power in the comments section down below, and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. The X-Trail E-Power launches here in Australia in 2 high-spec variants, TI from 54,190 and the TIL I have here from 57,190. It's a $4,200 premium over the petrol example. You can let me know your comments on that down below, but there are a couple of ways to tell it apart, starting with this black V-Motion grille. I think it looks sexy, looks handsome. As standard, both TI and TIL come equipped with matrix LED headlights on the E-Power and on the ICE versions, but to tell them apart, you've got these 20-inch alloy wheels on the top spec TIL. They're the same size as you'd get on a Mitsubishi Outlander, but unlike that car, they don't totally ruin the ride, as we'll come to in a minute. Final way to tell it apart is this E-Power badge down the side. It's a really handsome vehicle as well. I happen to really like the way the new X-Trail looks, both outside and inside, as we'll get to now. Jumping in the cabin of the new T33 Nissan X-Trail, if you've already seen Dan Gardner's review, you'll know how much of a difference this thing is to its predecessor. It is so much more handsome in here, feels more premium, and all of the touch points are just really nice. There are also some great thoughtful cabin touches that I'll get to in a minute, but let's start with the technology package, because this car is based on the same CMF-C platform as its smaller Qashqai sibling, and also the Mitsubishi Outlander. But it gets much bigger screens than the Outlander in top spec TI and TIL. You've got 12.3-inch touchscreen up here, which is responsive and has wireless Apple CarPlay and wired Android Auto. The graphics are definitely very Nissan, but it's something that you'll definitely get used to, and it looks like there's some customizability built into this screen to allow further updates. There's no software over-the-air updates for this vehicle just yet, but hopefully there will be changes to this infotainment system to really take advantage of the processing power behind it. You also have nice shortcut buttons, the camera button for reverse cameras and 360 monitors, which is standard on this vehicle. You've got a volume knob, a skip, a play, and a day and a night button here, all nice little shortcuts. And yeah, works well. Of course, we've also got a physical dual zone climate control. It's actually a tri-zone climate control system with the back seat getting its own climate system. It's so nice to not have to fiddle around with a touchscreen to adjust your temperature. So good. Below that, we've got USB charging points, one USB-C, one USB-A, and there's also a 12-volt socket. And then there's a wireless charging pad down here as well, nicely rubberized so your phone doesn't slide around. This is one big difference for the E-Power. It's this sort of center stack here where you get a different shifter design to you get in the normal ICE cars. And you also get these buttons up here. You've got EV mode and E-pedal mode, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we take this car out for a spin. 2 decent sized cup holders and a nice butterfly opening armrest, which is comfortable to rest your arms on. The big thing the X-Trail has going over its Outlander cousin though is this extra mezzanine storage behind the center console. It keeps clutter out from the top here, and you've also got decent door bins that are great for holding a 1-litre camping bottle. Back to technology, 12.3-inch digital driver's display, interact with the steering wheel controls here. Now for me, I would like the controls swapped around the other way, so the adaptive cruise on here and the interaction here, but that's just because I drive so many cars where that is the way around. I think if you own this vehicle, you'd get used to it pretty quickly. As for material quality and build, this TIL gets quilted Napa leather upholstery. The seats have 3-stage heating and 12-way electric adjustment, including lumbar in and out and up and down, and they're super comfortable. The only miss on this TIL for 57 grand is that you don't get ventilated seats. I would love to see that, but you need to step up to the Pathfinder to get cooled seats. Finally, we have a Bose 10-speaker stereo, which does a really good job of rendering your music, and you've got this lovely big opening panoramic sunroof to let plenty of light into the Nissan X-Trail's cabin. Now, when we talk about practicalities and thoughtful touches in the Nissan X-Trail, it's not quite as exciting as, say, a drift mode in an Audi RS3. But there is a lot to talk about here, and it comes down to the 85-degree opening doors and the difference between the door hinges on this car to the Mitsubishi Outlander. The Outlander uses basic stamped pressed parts that look pretty cheap. You come over to the X-Trail and this broad door opening, 85 degrees says Nissan, and you find these beautifully cast little pieces that attach the door to the body of this vehicle. It's the little things that really separate this X-Trail from the Outlander, and as we get into the driving dynamics, you'll see how that translates out on the road as well. After the hinges, the back seat of the X-Trail continues to impress. The E-Power is only available in 5-seat variants here in Australia, but there is the potential that 7-seat lower grades may be added in the future. You can let me know if that's a consideration for you when buying a medium SUV, whether you want those 2 extra jump seats. But without them, the rear seat of the X-Trail is super capacious. I've got heaps of legroom, heaps of tow room, and a decent amount of headroom, even under this panoramic sunroof. You've also got niceties like 3-stage outboard seat heating for the rear seats in this TIL, and that third climate control zone that I mentioned earlier. The leather upholstery continues back here with its quilting. You've got this nice sort of brown touch here, although the tops of the doors are hard and scratchy, but that's sort of because we've got these really nice integrated sunblinds. So I think I can give Nissan a pass for having scratchy materials, because these mean you don't have to use those horrendous stick-on sunblinds, and I think that's awesome. The only other loss in the Nissan X-Trail is the center armrest, which isn't really an armrest because it's a ski port pass-through, and you've got this hard plastic here where you want to rest your elbow. It's the little things that sort of start to erode the Nissan X-Trail's excellence, but personally I can look past them because this back seat is really comfortable, adaptable, it's on sliding rails, and you've also got several positions of backrest adjustment too, and you've got a great stadium view out over the front seats. The X-Trail E-Power does lose a little bit of boot space to the ICE version, but what's 10 litres between friends? At 575 litres of boot space, this thing still has plenty of cargo area for all your stuff and all your things. You've also got this neat divide and hide storage solution to separate the boot a little bit so that you don't have shopping and bags sliding around in the back there. You've also got a nice light coloured headliner and light coloured cargo cover, as well as a power tailgate with locking function, and on the TIL you also get kick to open functionality, which is a great touch. I'm just going to take a moment to talk about the real-world ownership costs of the Nissan X-Trail, because against its rivals it is an expensive vehicle to maintain. It does need to go back to the Nissan dealer pretty often to keep it up to schedule. You do get a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, but maintenance is due every 12 months or 10,000 Ks. Now that means if you're an average Australian that allegedly drives around 13,000 Ks a year, by the time you get to the 5th year of ownership, you'll need to pay for that 6th service. And it's really expensive for the Nissan X-Trail E-Power, costing $698. I'll put up on screen exactly what it costs to service right now so you can see how it compares to its rivals. Let's get the theory out of the way with how this E-Power system works before we jump into how it feels to drive. So there's 2 electric motors for the all-wheel drive system, one front and one rear, 150 kilowatts up the front and 100 kilowatts at the back. There's also a turbo petrol engine with a variable compression ratio that produces 106 kilowatts of power, but that engine doesn't physically spin a drive shaft that spins the front wheels. Instead, it's all powered through electric motors. When you're cruising along at 60 like we are now, it's mostly through the front electric motor, but as you get a little bit more power going through the vehicle, it uses all-wheel drive, and there's also drive modes here that shuffle around the power split. So off-road puts a little bit more power to the rear end of this vehicle, and on-road and eco keeps it a little bit more at the front. It also adjusts the regen braking. Now this car has e-pedal regen braking mode, just like a Leaf does. It brings you down to about 7 k's an hour, at which point you have to step on the brakes yourself to bring the car to a full stop. Now that apparently is on request of customers. Nissan said they've listened to customers and that's what they want. As someone who spends a lot of time driving electric vehicles, for me I would prefer if that came to a complete stop, but perhaps over time it'll be updated to reflect a slightly different driving style. Now, all that aside, does this thing work in practice? I think yes. It gives a really EV-like driving experience. That's what all the marketing material says, but I can tell you, in the real world, it does feel more EV than hybrid. Under light throttle, as I am now, just speeding up to about 40 k's an hour, we're on full electric drive. I'm just watching the energy flow meter here, and it's silent. And even when the petrol engine kicks in like this, the E-Power remains really well insulated. I think it's a really good job Nissan has done, and it's not just from insulation and NVH suppression, there's actually some technology going on at work as well. High-end vehicles such as Bentleys, Range Rovers and Rolls-Royces pioneered this technology of active noise cancellation, and it features here in the X-Trail, and it makes a huge difference. The car is really silent. As I said, even when the petrol engine kicks in, it stays really nice and quiet. It's got a speaker and a microphone, so it picks up the noise that the engine is making and sends a speaker note out from the rear of the vehicle to actively cancel it. It all works seamlessly. It's a funny one, the E-Power, because in theory, when you start looking at it on paper, it is a very complex and intricate powertrain, kind of unlike a Toyota RAV4 series parallel hybrid, which is pretty simple. But in the real world, this car feels a lot more simple and a lot more streamlined than that RAV4 in operation. Now, after I've explained what all the things are going on under the bonnet, the front seat and the rear end of this car is, how much power does it make? Well, it makes 157 kilowatts of combined power. So a little bit down on a RAV4 hybrid, but the way the twin electric motors deploy power makes it feel a bit more urgent, a bit faster in the real world. And I think that is ultimately what matters. Nissan doesn't quote a combined torque figure because it says that there's no point in the rev range, which it all lines up, but in theory, there's about 500 Newton meters available from standstill, so it does drive like an EV. You get that instant hit of torque and off you go. The throttle response is sporty, and you can ratchet it up even further in sport mode, which does wake this car up. Now, we did about 300 Ks yesterday on a really testing set of back roads, real Australian conditions, and the X-Trail excelled. You've got off-road mode as well, which really helped on dirt. It sent a little bit more power to the rear and just kept this thing feeling neutral. And the electric all-wheel drive system, because there's actually no physical connection between the two motors, can act really quickly. It's almost proactive in how well it sends torque to the rear wheels when front wheel slip is detected. It's really impressive, and it's something definitely worth testing out if you have an X-Trail and you want to test one. Putting technology and the drivetrain aside, this car also happens to ride incredibly well. We found that with the regular ICE car as well, but even adding 269 kilos of weight to this vehicle with the retuned suspension doesn't seem to hurt how it rides or handles. It goes around corners more than well enough for the type of vehicle. It is a very secure car when it comes to road holding, and the ride quality remains excellent, especially on the TI with its 19-inch alloy wheels. But this TIL, even with the 20s, it is a little bit more fidgety. You can definitely feel a bit more low frequency bumps coming through into the cabin, but it's nowhere near as bad as a Mitsubishi Outlander on the same size 255/45 R20 series tires. Really feels like Nissan has gone the extra mile to refine this X-Trail in terms of the way it rides, to make it feel that bit more luxurious and put together than the slightly at sea Mitsubishi Outlander, and I really, really appreciate that. Finally, we come on to safety. Now, you get Nissan ProPilot as standard. That means adaptive cruise control with stop and go, a really decent lane trace assist system. You also get things like blind spot monitoring, forwards AEB with pedestrian, cyclist and junction detection, and you also get reverse AEB as well as a 360 camera on this top model TI and TIL. That's all great stuff, and it means this car is equipped with a 5-star ANCAP rating and a 5-star Euro NCAP rating. Definitely feels safe, and the passive safety is excellent. The ESC tune can occasionally be heavy-handed, but we're very thankful it's there and think it suits the way that this X-Trail drives. So, in summary, the X-Trail E-Power, it may not offer the same ultra-low fuel consumption as a RAV4 hybrid. We've seen 6.5 litres per 100 Ks on our testing loop of 300 Ks of country driving yesterday. Definitely not bad, but not quite as competitive as the 4.8 litres per 100 Ks in the RAV4. But this powertrain is more than that. It offers refinement far and away above anything a RAV4 can or anything a Haval H6 can. It feels really well developed, really all of a piece, and very, very refined. Definitely take one for a test drive if you're considering a hybrid midsize SUV, because even though it might not stand out on paper as efficient as a RAV4, I think once you get behind the wheel, you're going to be pretty impressed by this thing. The X-Trail E-Power has a few easy holes to pick with it. It is quite expensive considering the fuel economy. It also has short service intervals, expensive servicing, but When you put those things aside and take this thing out on the road, it really delivers on the experience. The drive is much like an EV, and that 3-cylinder engine is really well refined. The ride comfort is also excellent, and its poise on a country road is exactly what you need from a family SUV. It'll keep your family safe. So for all those reasons, I really have to recommend the X-Trail E-Power as a great choice in this segment. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below this video. Let me know if you'd go for this, the ICE version, or perhaps one of its competitors, or you're waiting for a fully electric vehicle. Let me know your thoughts, and while you're there, hit subscribe to the Wheels YouTube channel and go over to the website and check out all the coverage on the X-Trail, its rivals, and E-Power in general. Thank you very much for watching.